Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for coming to the UCF Art Gallery today and visiting the 2021 Faculty Exhibition. I'm Shannon Lindsey. I'm the gallery director here and also faculty in the School of Visual Arts and Design. And welcome to our second faculty panel. And I will introduce our panelists today. We have Ashley Taylor, is a printmaker that utilizes her background in design, illustration, and drawing to satirize American culture. She works in the capacity of marks and imagery to simulate the overwhelming effects of instability while igniting a sense of sanity and self-craft. Ashley Taylor is an Adobe educator and serves on the executive board of the AIGA Orlando. She received her BFA in graphic design from the University of Central Florida in 2011 and her MFA from the University of Florida in 2015, and is currently a lecturer at the School of Visual Arts and Design at UCF. Then next we have Chuck Abraham. Chuck is an associate professor of art at UCF, currently serving as the associate director for the School of Visual Arts and Design and the coordinator for the graphic design area of the emerging media track. Prior to UCF, he was the manager of creative services at Universal Studios Florida. With over 45 years experience in design and illustration, he has worked as a designer, art director, creative director, and illustrator for various ad agencies, design studios, and corporations throughout the Southeast and West. He continues to produce design and illustration work for regional, national, and international clients. His work has been featured in Print Regional Design, the New York Art Directors Annual, and the National Association of Educational Broadcasters Design Annual. And lastly, we have Jason Burrell. Jason is an assistant director and senior lecturer at the School of Visual Arts and Design and the College of Arts and Humanities at the University of Central Florida since 2002. And he has worked professionally as an artist, designer, illustrator, and photographer. So, welcome our panelists. And today we are going to ask our panelists a few questions that I have prepared, and then we will turn it over to the audience if you have any questions you would like to ask the panelists. So I will start with a few questions for you individually, and then have a few questions for you as a group. So we will start with Chuck. How do you balance your artistic goals with the needs of a client? And on top of that, what does a perfect client do? And what was your worst?
Lots of multi-part questions. When you're working with a client, obviously they're paying the bills on everything, so you really got to take very sort of close attention to their what their needs and objectives are. Now, you also have to remind them at some point in time, and I find this happens a lot of times in the process, that the reason that they hired you is because you have expertise in a certain area. And their ideas and objectives are paramount, and that's what has to reach their particular audience. But you also want to do it without causing harm to that message that they're trying to get across, or to make sure that those goals that they are going for are not sort of corrupted by an image that is not working for them and not conveying those ideas. So you have a little bit of, it's always a compromise when you're working with that, with clients, but hopefully it's something that as long as you have good, clear communication with that client and understand what their objectives are, that's the mainstay on that. The second part of the question was...
So what does a perfect client do?
A perfect client doesn't necessarily give you the freedom to do whatever you want to do. I find a lot of times that especially with some of the art directors and creative directors I work with, if they kind of hold to their guns as to what they feel is the most important aspect of that image that you're developing or campaign that you're developing, you tend to produce your best work under those circumstances. I've had instances where I have, I can count probably over the almost 50 years now of time period that I've been doing this, maybe a handful of jobs that was a situation where you walk in and they go, okay, do whatever you want to do. And I always find that they come out okay, but probably not up to the same level of expectation that they wanted and I wanted. But I find as long as that collaboration stays in place, and as long as they're clear, again, into what their objectives are, what their goals are, that makes for a really, really good working collaboration. In terms of worst situations, wow. So many. Gosh. Well, I can think of a couple that just, again, kind of goes back to one that just popped in my mind just because the outcome was really, really off, and it was because the company that I was working with at that time did not have a really, really well-trained production staff. We were designing some billboards. At that time, Universal Studios was using a lot of three-dimensional billboards. I was actually talking with Ashley about this earlier. We had just gotten the Barney venue, was about to open out at Universal at that time. This was in the late 90s, say 97 or so. So we were designing billboards for that, and when you are designing a billboard, you use a temporary placeholder image when you're doing the production art to show the billboard company. You mark on it very clearly for position only, FPO. And so I had marked up the board, sent all the color comps over to the billboard company, and then about 2 weeks later, I was shocked as I was driving into work to see this giant billboard on I-4 with a picture of Barney on it and in big orange letters painted on top, FPO. So, needless to say, things like that where, you know, it's just people that are in the pipeline have not been trained correctly. Those kind of instances always come into play. I have some other horror stories, but I will not. Most of them are based on my on what I did wrong. So yeah, I'll pass those by right now.
That'll be for your TED Talk.
Yeah. Now those are the ones that Victor always coerces me into telling his class so that he can feel better when he walks out of the classroom.
Thank you so much, Chuck. Next, I have a question for Jason. Your work that's in the exhibition called Current Progress includes one of your first paintings and one of your most recent paintings. Sorry. What did you experience while working on this, and what do you think of it now?
The painting began in September of 1987, my first painting class on one side, and a friend of mine is retiring, so I made a painting on the back side in my most recent style with my most recent concerns, and worked with a woodworker, designed and built this format so that it flips the imagery so that you can stand in one place and you can pop between this kind of shallow academic still life, and then it goes into this deeper field that has richer emotional content. I'm really pleased with the concept. I think I want to turn this into an assignment for students. The idea of making imageries where it's just a 1-2 animation, where it's about the contrast and juxtaposition, as simply but hopefully as richly as you possibly can. As an artist, sometimes I'm very satisfied and thrilled with my work, and sometimes I'm not. And so I still want to take this back to the studio and have fun and develop it further, because I believe it's well begun, but it might be time for it has to be released in order to ship it off. So I thought it would be a very good piece for this faculty show, so that it would relate to the students' progress. They could see it's one of the issues we deal with in the nature of art education, how to transcend academic technical learning into personal content. And I believe it's on display here.
Thank you so much, Jason. And I have a question for Ashley. Would you describe your work as protest or activist? And what do you hope to inspire within your viewers?
So aspirationally, I believe it's activist. Hoping that my viewers can look at the work and think about their relationship to the work and who they are. A lot of times I present two sides in the work, so you as the viewer question like, which side are you on? Are you on the side that the artist is critiquing, or the side that the artist is like aspirational for hoping you are. Realistically, I think my work is mostly protest, because I know that's a really hard ask of the viewer. So yeah, realistically, I think it's protest because it's pointing out the flaws of our culture, of how we treat each other, and just kind of making the viewer aware of it in hopes that maybe they can have a change. So yeah, I think it's mostly protest, because I want my viewer to at least be aware of something and then start to think about how they exist in that world.
Does the format and scale affect how that's conveyed? Do you have one piece in an exhibition that's really large and then a series that are smaller?
Yeah, when I made the largest one, called Price on Your Head, is about football, right? So we tend to perceive football in an American culture as this amazing phenomenon of just like bodies, like, you know, trying to give their all and win the game. But the way I see it, there's like two brains clashing and hurting themselves, right? Like in the long run, they could develop what we call CTE, which is like a disease that they discovered from football players that they get through concussions. So the monumental piece, definitely, I think I want them to see, not just football players. They'll see it from afar, they're like, oh wow, football players. But then they get closer and they see that there's like a traumatic thing happening. So yes, I think scale definitely comes into play. With the smaller works, I wanted to bring in my love for ephemera and like newspapers, so like they're the scale of like a kind of a newspaper, to point out, you know, a lot of the issues that are happening in our country right now.
Thank you so much. So I have a couple questions open for all of you. And this one I adapted from our first panel that Larry Cooper moderated. It was such a good question. So if you were to go back in time as an undergraduate student, what classes would you take knowing what you know now?
No, I was just saying, I would go back and just take classes. Unfortunately, the first 2 years that I had no formal training in art until my sophomore year in college. So I think I would have started earlier that process in terms of the formal education, because I had to unlearn a lot of bad habits that just, because I was up to a certain point self-taught, and especially on drawing. So yeah, that would be mine. I'd just go back and start earlier, that formal process much earlier.
I would have taken more writing and rhetoric classes. I still want to. So there's so much about, you know, how, like a lot of misconception about making art, and I think you have to be able to write about what you make. And so I would definitely take more writing classes. And I would have paid more attention to my chemistry classes, because there's so much chemistry involved in what I do and what the artists do.
Philosophy and technology. Whether we like it or not, or acknowledge it or not, we live in a world made of ideas. And philosophy classes deals with that in a directness that we sometimes miss. But then also to prepare for this ongoing evolution, which we're already in the midst of just constant upgrades and advancements in our ability to make machines that are approximating thinking.
Thank you so much. And then the other question I have for the group is, how do you balance teaching, administrative roles, and also roles outside of the university with your creative practice? And I have a follow-up to that afterwards. Is that what's fun?
You use the verb balance.
What does that mean?
It turns out that, well, this is something that we need a university class about, because I found myself unprepared for it, and I witness it daily, this inability to balance this wonderful opportunity and need for help at the school, from an individual student into a class, into an institution. There's such a calling and a need for help and advancement, It's hard not to be scooped up in that vacuum of, again, positive opportunity and the grimmer need. So I think I do not have balance.
Hour by hour, right? Maybe?
I strive.
Well, I don't know. I had lots of practice because I was a single dad raising 2 daughters, and that's a whole another ball of wax right there itself. So a lot of times I was trained to focus on specific tasks at specific times, and then in terms of the work, I would actually run through their day, get them all set up and everything, and once they were fed, washed up, ready to go to bed, then I would go to work in my studio. And, I could dedicate maybe 3-4 hours of time just working in a block like that. So I don't know. I think it's I don't know if you're familiar with the term Chinese boxes, where you're organizing things and just put them in different boxes, and then okay, this is this task, this is this task, this is this task. So it just sort of kind of makes a little bit of logically it works better for me to kind of approach it that way. So handle one task at a time, get it done, move on to the next, and then if another priority shifts, then adapt to it and move on.
So I discovered what I can't do, which is schedule time to be creative. I will set aside time and say, okay, I have 4 hours, I'm gonna be creative. And then all of a sudden I'm not. And I just wanna go answer my emails or do something. So I've learned that when it hits, when you're excited about something, it's usually in the car on your drive home, or then you have to just say, you know what, I was supposed to do this tonight, but now I've got to just make up for it. I gotta work on this thing, which it might be at 11 o'clock at night, it might be at 1 a.m., which is not healthy. But it's this is where I'm excited about making something, so I've just got to set other things aside and work on it. Meaning, if that happens, I've got to be way more organized in my life, knowing that I can't wait till the last minute on deadlines, because then I have to say, well, I'm creative, but I've got to get this done because it's due at midnight. No, I can't do that. So you've got to be way more organized in your life to be able to do that, to make up for the fact that creativity just doesn't happen, right? You get inspired by something, and then you got to fight to make it, do it. So yeah, the balance of teaching, sometimes I have to push off grading because it's wow, I must make this thing, or I must do this thing, or I've got to push off making because I've got a grade, or I've got to work on class. So I haven't found the balance either, still working on it, but I know what doesn't work, so that's something, right?
Yeah, that's the first step. Absolutely.
And that really connects to my follow-up with how do all of these roles that you all balance or try to balance inspire your role as an artist?
Well, I think, yeah, in my situation, since I'm very much working in the area of applied design, it's pretty easy because there's always a deadline, and that's what you have to work toward. And there's always a budget, so you have those constraints that you're kind of confined in. And it's pretty linear. You have this needs to be due A, B, C, and D, and you just follow that step and sequence through it.
I think because I work I'm an executive member of the AIGA Orlando, so we're a bunch of volunteers, and we try to organize events for students, members of the community. So in a way, I think that helps me help the community in which my artwork can't sometimes, right? So at least I'm trying to actually do something that I feel helps others, and that's what I always want to do, in some way in teaching, but I think some of these roles are feeding back into that need to help other people, so yeah.
The paradox of being an artist who's both inspired and terrified specifically about the built environment how we're removing ourselves from every context we've had previously and recreating them or creating new ones, rejecting them. And then to be part of that process as well as an administrator is creates a bit of a feedback cycle, and it makes you aware more sharply of how all of us coming together to create the infrastructure within which we live is both one of our most powerful and glorious creations, and it is also a manacle that is binding us and harming us at the same time. We are not deploying enough wisdom to have the best, that is to say, the electrical system, for example, that we need. We need an electrical system, but we need one that we can live with, that our grandchildren and future generations can live with, and we're not doing that. But we can't just reject it and go back to simple answers of the Luddite. So how do we proceed from this moment forward? I believe these are some of the big questions of our time, and that I delight in selling my internal combustion car and acquiring a hybrid car, but wondering if it's still not enough. So good luck.
Thank you all so much. I would like to turn it over to our audience. If anybody in person has a question, or if maybe there's any questions that are presented on the live stream, feel free to post them. Anyone here? Okay, I see Larry and then Joe. Larry.
Chuck, can you tell us about your love of illustration, what you look forward to when it comes to illustration?
Yeah, I mean, I probably am better known as a designer, but I started out actually as an illustrator, and that's where my focus and emphasis is now. The thing that got me into it when I was a kid is I had an aunt that subscribed to Saturday Evening Post, and she would save all the magazines, and I would open these things up and I'd see these incredible pictures in there that were in support of whatever that story was, and I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And I never even knew what it was called, that it was a formal profession, until actually I got into college and realized, oh, you can actually make money by drawing pictures. That sounds pretty good. So I kind of shifted into that. That sort of got me started. That, and I was very much a child of the 50s. There was a resurgence and rediscovery especially in the United States at that time, of monsters. It was a big part of the pop culture back in that time period, and I love those things and love drawing those complex shapes, and that's actually, unfortunately, kind of what I'm known for now in the illustration side. And I say unfortunately because it's pretty sad to be a 70-year-old man and drawing monsters. So, well, at least according to my children, anyway. Yeah. Don't pay any attention to him. He's this age and he's still drawing monsters. Yeah. I don't know. It's the influences were very strong there early on. I managed to. I had about a 25-year hiatus away from illustration, where I was really kind of concentrating on graphic design. And when I came back and started working again, I found that stylistically things had definitely changed, because there was a big shift from traditional work to digital at that time. We're talking in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s. And I adapted those processes pretty quickly because, primarily because I saw what was happening with them. I saw a lot of people that were in town. Here is a good example. There were several designers here in town that made a really good living with the simple fact that they could take a bow compass and craft the perfect circle for production purposes. Those guys disappeared almost overnight because, computer, illustrator, shift, click, boom, I'm done. It was no longer an issue. Those sort of tasks and sort of skill sets got deleted pretty quickly because of the digital transition. And I found that by using those applications and that hardware, my workflow and my style changed significantly. and became much more closer to what I wanted to accomplish. It originally had that initial vision in my head. I was able to get closer to that from an execution standpoint. So, yeah, I mean, the same things that I started out enjoying when I was about illustration, when I first was exposed to it, are the same things that carry me forward now. It's always about a visual narrative and telling a story through that image. So that's the thing that still excites me about it.
And Joe, you have a question?
I was curious, to y'all teaching writing, capable of writing, skill sets, areas that are more digital printmaking, traditional. I was really curious about your process in your environment. You know, is it need like wake up at 5 a.m. to do it, or you don't get outside for 8 or sort of easy to listen to? What do you do to get into the rhythm of your creating art in different ways?
So usually it's something I've witnessed. So I like a lot of my work is kind of based on voyeurism, like watching other people, or like so I'll get inspired. Like some of the works even in here are actually based on real world like situations I was in, like the smaller works where someone, you know, ripped off a mask right in front of me and like threw it on my cash register just to like, because they were mad they didn't wear a mask or something like that. And other things like football ones are, my family's from Pittsburgh, so they love Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh no, just gonna. My family's from Pittsburgh, so they love Pittsburgh Steelers, and that's where CTE was discovered, and it was discovered in several of their players. And at the time that I made that work, it was right before the pandemic happened, and there was a player named Antonio Brown, who some of you may know, who was going through a lot of ridicule by the fans, the press, everyone, for being really egotistical, really just kind of like crazy. But I knew him as a really humble player, really, you know, he was very kind and everything. It's because there was a particular hit in a football game that he suffered a major concussion. His whole personality shifted. So like, that's what was the impetus for that work, was like, at that moment, someone changed. So a lot of times it's, yeah, like, long story short, it's based on real world things that I witnessed that I feel like I need to revisit and communicate to the viewer.
Caffeine and loud rock and roll.
There you go. That works.
That's it.
Unfortunately, I still draw a lot from just weird stuff that's happened since I've been alive. So life experience, I guess, is a good trigger for a lot of things that kind of drives me, especially some of the comics related things I do. So yeah, so just those events that I'll look back on and I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, that's kind of telling a story, and I'll stretch that and push it further and take it in a different direction. So.
Is there like a time when you focus on, I got everything else done, I feel like I'm done with my work for the day, so I can focus in and I lay out my in front of me what crafted, or do you wake up and the best time we wake up and get distractions that sort of piling up?
I wish I had that balance.
Yeah.
I wish could be intentional. I work best at night, so that's a struggle. If you have an 8 a.m. class, you're like, oh, okay, am I going to suffer tomorrow? but on the weekends, I try to just like don't answer any emails. Just like weekends is the best at night for me. Where you just have to like shut the world off and hope you make something.
Yeah, again, it's kind of deadline driven in a lot of my instances, so I try to plan around that, although I'll get calls, I still get calls on Friday and we need this by Monday. So it's like, okay, well, I ain't mowing the yard this weekend, you know, that ain't gonna happen. So, yeah, it really depends on kind of that sort of constraint that you're dealing with, but I don't know. I've never, unfortunately, I've never been really good about, I have a wonderful idea. I think I'll go ahead and paint that or draw that. Or, you know, if it doesn't have a deadline attached to it, I'm probably not going to do it. I might write it down somewhere, and I'll explore that a little later on. But yeah, usually doesn't happen. So.
On a week-to-week basis, I'm never more myself than I am on Sunday. I can have let the troubles and travails of the week fade away. I can catch up on my sleep. I become more myself again, and I'll make better, more creative decisions with a bit of a remove from my work.
Any other questions? Oh, yes, hi.
This is going to be crazy.
Actually, I have a question for you. Is your work therapeutic? Once you get your work out and printed, you feel a little bit like, oh, okay, I can share my frustration with the rest of the world and on to the next thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, because there's a lack of accountability out there in the world that I can't control, but in my little small space, I can hold them accountable, or I can be aspirational that they will be held accountable at some point. So yes, it's definitely therapeutic. And just like, even in the making of the work, so I make woodcuts, so you're physically chiseling, so like you're just like, you know, like just physically also letting out your frustrations too while you're making the work, which is also pretty nice. So yeah, thank you.
Any other questions?
It's really for anybody. What is the role of mistakes in your art?
The role of what?
Mistakes.
Mistakes?
Yeah.
Oh. I try to incorporate accidents because a lot of times when you're especially working under stress of a deadline, things happen that never meant to. It used to be a lot more impactful when it was traditional work. It still is. If I'm doing something traditional, I'll still get an occasional request for that. Because if you mess up there, then you have to start from scratch. You know. So, but digital is not so much a factor. I've got that magic button, Command Z, and I can back up about 25 or 30 times and do iterative saves, and then work on top of this and explore. So it usually gets incorporated into it. In my case, I try to just keep it as part of it, and if it adds to the composition and adds to the depth of the image, then yeah, let it go. Let you guys.
There's different kinds. There's the kinds that are true mistakes. They need to be replaced or fixed. There's mistakes that turn out better than what you intended or something different than what you intended. And therefore, they might need an evaluation to choose that they should be replaced, or evaluation that results in recognizing something better has happened. So to keep that neutrality and open-mindedness in the midst of the flow is I think many artists cultivate a process that allows things to happen, and I have some of that in my practice.
You know, I think a lot of our students don't understand yet, which I'm trying to convey to them, like, is you can redraw a drawing or you can redo something, and I find I improve upon it so much better. I think I'm slowly learning it myself. You know, I was working on a drawing recently where I just re-earthed something I did, and it was polished. At the time, I thought it was polished. I said, yeah, that's a done drawing. Then I brought it in the iPad and I redrew it, and I was like, oh my God, like this is so much better than the other one. So the ability to revisit something or repeat is okay in making work. And it's kind of, it's along the line of mistakes, right? Yeah. So, or if I make a mistake in a drawing, I'm not worried because I know I can redraw it. The fact that we have iPads and tablets that are so accessible now just makes life a lot easier. Even in the planning stages, then I can bring it and I can plan it out on an iPad and bring it to a more analog process if I needed to. So I don't let the mistakes mess me up. I just say, oh, okay, I know I can improve upon this. And then usually the mistake yields to something a lot better. So.
answer a question on Facebook.
Oh, great. How important is the role of mentorship in your personal work? And do you have any mentors? Or have you had any in the past?
I have had, I'm a teacher, in part because I had so many good teachers who were so inspiring to me. This work in this faculty show is a gift for one of them. It was packaged up in the mail and sent off to them in a couple of weeks. We're all human beings. It transcends being an artist, the vocation of artistry to all humans. We are all here because we have had variations of mentorship that have taught us how to survive, that have inspired us to make, hopefully, better decisions.
Yeah, I had after I got out of school, even out of my graduate degree, my first full-time gig was working for PBS, and there was one particular artist there that was in the same section I was in. I learned more by working side by side with him that first year. He is really the person I consider to be his name is Glenn Warren. He's unfortunately not alive anymore, but I learned more from him just by being able to watch his processes and his work. And that mentorship is actually incredibly valuable. Now, on the other side of that coin, he was probably one of the most horrible people that ever walked the face of the earth in terms of personality. But you have to pick what you can from your mentors, take what you can from your mentors, and if you can work with them and see the value of some of the aspects of what they're doing as an artist, it really, really it can make a huge dramatic difference in your life. So.
Yeah, I had a great mentor that was actually here at UCF, who was in the drawing program, pulled me from design. Like I spent more time. I was in the graphic design program here, but I spent more time in the print shop.
I wondered where you were going with your class.
And it was kind of a similar situation to this person who some days you wanted to just punch him in the face, not be violent, and other days you were like, no, this he's really looking out for you. You know, just to have someone like approach you and say, hey, I was thinking about your work, and I think, you know, like that's amazing to have someone who's already has their own studio practice, but is like thinking about yours and wants to give you advice on it. I thought that was like really important to me, and yeah, the importance of mentorship is it's so vital for everyone.
Yeah, it really is.
Did you have that?
Oh, it was back on the digital, your creative process. You're talking about when you find inspiration or creating work. Do you think you create digitally or do you create analog? And then translate that. Or how
It depends. I mean, I used to, like, I was really bad about doodling, you know, just scrap of paper, pencil, and a couple of minutes, and all of a sudden you're chasing an idea. That sort of migrated now for me with devices like iPad. I keep that handy. That's become my digital sketchbook now. So I'd say probably about 99% of what I do now is starts in a digital state and ends that way. It's just gotten so much easier to have that full contingency of tool sets. Because if I'm working traditionally with physical material, if I'm drawing and I'm like, watercolor wash would really be good on that, and I have to go set that up, you know, and then apply that. With the digital tools, it's just right there. It's the access to it is built in. You just ship tool sets and boom, you're gone. So.
It's funny because it took me a long time to be comfortable with my drawing style and felt, God, it took me all the way up into grad school. I thought I was starting to make decent drawings. And then I got into woodcut. And you can make a really great drawing, but it translates differently to woodcut because you're using chisels. And then I was like, oh man, I made a great drawing, but what the heck did I just do? So I like going to the digital universe, knowing that I have complete control. When I'm like tired of making woodcuts and stuff like that, I like to go to the iPad, draw, and explore, and a lot faster too, because woodcuts take time. But I also use the digital to plan out some of the analog stuff too, because I can work quickly, I can work, in between classes, just like draw. It's always handy. That's the amazing part of it. Or you could sit, before COVID in a restaurant, do it. No one would be like peeking over you. You could just like sit there. So I love kind of navigating between the analog and the digital to also keep it fresh too. Like when I'm tired of doing one thing, I can navigate to the other, and I don't feel burnt out from it.
Yeah, they no longer matter. I used to think of them very differently, but now my preparatory processes will involve sketching in pencil in a notebook. It'll involve being inspired by an image I find online, dragging it into Photoshop and manipulating it. The preparatory sketch for that painting was done using a bottle of whiteout and a Xerox machine. And so it just doesn't matter. But it used to, and learning that it doesn't matter to overcome those boxes.
Well, I want to say one thing about that, because I see this happen all the time especially our advanced illustration course. Kids will walk into that course, and that's primarily a course that concentrates on digital illustration techniques using a very specific software that emulates traditional media. But I have a lot of kids that walk into that course, and that's the first painting course they've taken. So if they're trying to emulate gouache or encaustic, and they've had no experience in the real world dealing with that, it kind of defeats the purposes as to what they're trying, what the objective is in the look of that piece. Because a lot of times the media that you choose will dictate how that image evolves and how it actually is constructed. And if they don't have that experience in working with the physical media, and then they're trying to translate it on the digital side, they don't have any experience or expectations as to what that's going to actually look like.
Any other questions for our panel? Okay. Well, thank you all so much for coming, and thank you to our panelists for participating, and we hope to see you again soon at the UCF Art Gallery.
On behalf of the panelists, I'd like to thank Shannon Lindsey, Jean-Claude Roche, Larry Cooper, and Shannon Lindsey for putting together such a fantastic exhibition and these multiple panels. It's been a fun time to be part of this community. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.